Hello, everyone. My name is Dalton Elliott. I'm the Director of Sales and Customer Experience at Lima Capital. We are the nation's premier lender for real estate investors. So very excited about today. I'm joined by Danny and Eric. They're both with Home Depot. So fellas, thanks for taking time out of your schedule to chat with me.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thank you.
Cool. And y'all are both located in Atlanta, right?
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
So we, Lima Capital, we were founded in Atlanta, and so we'll dive into the Atlanta market specifically in a little bit. I'll pick your brain on what's happening there as it relates to rehabs, construction, rental, everything in between. I have, as I was thinking about content and kind of stuff to chat about, I thought back to college. Right. So I went to college in Greenville at Furman University, and every once in a while I needed to go to a home improvement store. And don't beat me up, but the closest one to campus was a competitor. And I got to thinking, now I frequent Home Depot. It is the closest, right? So just thinking through that, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about competitive advantages. Like why, if I could go back to college Dalton and say, hey, simpleton, like drive the extra 2 miles and show up at the spectacular Home Depot, what's the competitive advantage and reasoning there?
So, Eric, I'll start first. Actually, both Eric and I started in the store. This is at home for both of us, but I know I worked at two different stores nearby. So I went to school at Clemson. So I worked at a store in Seneca, South Carolina, and Easley, South Carolina, which isn't too far from Greenville. But anyhow, I think a couple of things that, reason people would come to the store would be for customer service. So our founders started Home Depot. Taking care of our customers is the most important thing. So I think as a competitive advantage, I think Home Depot has become, a standard for customer service. And I also think just from expertise, we've hired a lot of plumbers, electricians, and tradespeople stores that really can help customers solve issues or problems that they have. At least those are two things I think off the top of my head.
Yeah, and only to add a little bit to it, I think one of the things you get as an advantage at Home Depot is we're a very pro-centric organization, and being encapsulated in our pro desks where we have differentiated services for folks who take on repairs and manage repairs and deal with improvements as a business. It's a thing that we invest very heavily in and have a lot of tools for folks to go and take advantage of there. And then, the other thing that I would say is the range of services that Home Depot gets into from both a professional and a retail perspective, depending upon the demands you have for your projects. We have a DIY component, we have a professional component, and we have a do-it-for-me component situated to solve all kinds of needs for investors, professionals, and consumers alike.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I think even on our side of the business, we look at a lot of what we do is commoditized, right? And so how do you differentiate yourself above and beyond the product that you're selling? And a lot of times most of the time, you're able to make real great inroads with customers because if that customer experience is tip top and unmatched, it's just a pleasant experience, and that really buys you deep client loyalty, I think. So really interesting perspective on y'all's end. I'd like to dive right into it. So, y'all are really kind of the repair process experts. So kind of walk me through the repair process. And if you could touch on common, pitfalls, oversights, mistakes that y'all see and hear about as well.
That's great. I'd love to step through it. And, for the purposes of not just this conversation, but kind of how we think about and go to market in the business that Danny and I are particularly focused on, which is single family turnkey renovations. We like to think about it as kind of a 5-step process. And, on paper, it always goes perfectly clean, step by step, in order, sequentially, with no surprises. So that's the story we'll tell. The reality is it's construction and there's always adventures to get into. But when we break it down, the process for us starts with a customer asking to solve a problem. And in a lot of cases, those look like requests for bids that show up in our inbox. And we receive them a number of different ways. Sometimes it's as unsophisticated as a basic email. Sometimes we interact with client portals, and anywhere in between that range of connectivity, we participate. They'll go and ask for a bid. And the critical details to include when you want to start a repair transaction with somebody is got to get the property info, very base, very obvious. We want to know as a client, what are your repair preferences? So are there things that you always do to a home? Are there things that you always avoid in a home? Are there job killers where if we see X, then we need to stop repairs? What are your preferences and how do you like to run through your program? And then when we get all that ironed out, we'll partner with our field team and our service provider team and get them those details so they can go to the home to prepare a proposal for you. Things to consider, particularly for the newer among you investors out there, things like access matter a whole lot. Is it going to be meeting you on site? Is it going to be meeting an agent representative for you? Is it going to be lockbox or remote access? Is the repair environment something where there's going to be tenants involved? And then when it comes to putting together good proposals, do we have access to the utilities in the home? So is power turned on, gas turned on, water, things like that? And the reason that's important is you get a more encompassing picture of repairs and less surprises throughout the overall life cycle. And then the last thing is when it comes to the repair process, who's your point of contact going to be? Are you handling it directly? Are you taking the Q&A because there's going to be some back and forth? Or do you delegate that to somebody? And that's information we'd need real early in the process to make sure that we're all aligned around how we're going to navigate repairs on the project. That's kind of the first leg that I would get into. Did I leave anything out, Danny?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we run into it a lot. I think, the utilities, I think it's probably a much bigger deal, across the country that, these are things that are out of everyone's control, right? But the earlier that we can identify if there is an issue, there's a lot of times we see where, HVAC looks like it's in great condition, but until the power gets up turned, we don't know. And so, and that can really hurt the budget. And so a lot of the visual inspection stuff is good, but it can definitely derail a project. And if it's not turned on, till the end, you don't have any more adjustments that you can make to maybe tone down some of your other scopes. So I think that's a big one that probably is undervalued in the industry.
Oh, absolutely. And then if you kind of really go back to the idea that this is a 5-step procedure, then we're only to the point now where we get to the house to go do a visit and a scope of work preparation for you. So what happens is our authorized service provider makes it to the job site. They go through the repairs scope based on your preferences and or the things that might be required as part of safety or compliance kind of things in the home. And then we submit that scope of work to you as the investor, and you make your repair or purchase decision based on that additional input. Things that I would definitely consider as an investor as part of the scope of work are, what do you want to invest in the home? What are the product and finish selections that you want to put into play? Do you have a standard palette that you like to have in all of your houses, or is everything custom and really specific to the market that you're in? There's advantages and challenges to both versions of those things. Do you have a property checklist that has to be a certain standard, condition when the job gets over? That's a good thing to have early in the process. The other thing that is really important to consider early on is the expense for installing a $99 door and a $379 door inside of a home, labor wise, is nominal. Like there's not a lot of difference there. So choosing where you invest in the home to get the maximal return on your sale or your rent rate is an early thing to really consider. Another thing that helps a lot when you're trying to put together a repair proposal is understanding the budget. And there's a common misconception out there that says, hey, if I tell my contractor how much I want to spend on this property, they're going to spend everything and maybe even a little bit more. The converse is true. A lot of times the folks that we work with are also doing their own investment repairs, and they have a good handle on what it's going to take to get an ROI on a property in a given market. And they want to have the business flow. So they're going to help take care of you and help you make good decisions. And knowing the budget up front is going to help really inform that thought process. Other things that are really important to think about, there's some compliance things around, is the home pre-1978? There's maybe some lead safe work practices considerations that has an impact on cost overall. And then depending upon your format as an investor, there may be some renter friendly considerations. So you want to think about energy savings or curb appeal or storage, which is a big deal right now for people making changes, having extra spots to store all the things that they're acquiring as they spend more and more time at home. HOA requirements also worth thinking about. And then lastly, kind of the technical piece of this is, how do you want to see your bid? Is there a particular format that you like? Where should it go? Is it going into a portal or a Dropbox, or is it emails? Is there information you need to see on there in order to make informed decisions? And then how do you want to validate the scope of work? Do you want photos to go along with the conversation? Is there a certain kind of description you need? How do you like to see your quantifiers and your validations for what's being spent on the home? So a lot to consider when you get to the point of visiting the property and walking through a pretty detailed scope of work. So did I skip anything there? Or did I kind of, it's a lot. So is there any other?
Yeah, I was going to say back to kind of the budget perspective, one of the things that I feel like might go back to, differentiation. We're probably one of the most transparent contractors in the country. We love to just kind of share our knowledge and give input where we can. I think having that budget, or knowing we can really make recommendations on, if this was our house, this is where we'd want to spend the money. Or if, hey, there could be something that is major that we see as major, but the customer may be, oh, it's not really that big of a deal, and it can hurt you later on. So I think just having that open-ended conversation, I think is helpful. And as Eric mentioned, we're on site on these jobs where we can. We probably didn't tell you, but we've got about 40 or so branch folks out in the field that work directly for our business, that help kind of be our eyes and ears and works closely with those service providers. So we're not doing all this work just from Atlanta. We have local presence in a lot of the major areas where you're loaning out money. And so, we closely with those guys. But I just think the transparency is huge. If the deal goes, nobody's right, because then we're not going to have another opportunity to help support. So we try to be upfront as possible. If it takes more time to walk through the scope of work, then that it takes longer. That's, our guys are flexible. So we're here to help.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? And we have, think of a similar tangent. We have a tiered pricing system based on experience. And the idea is that, we lend to people who have never done a flip before. It's their first one. And we have an ecosystem for them to do one successfully and then do another, and then maybe chew off two at a time and really advance up. And so we have to make sure that they are getting competitive financing. And to your point, there's a symbiotic relationship between Home Depot and the client, and that you want them to be successful, right? Because when they're successful, they're going to continue to do business with you. They're going to do more projects. They're going to continue to advance. and it benefits everybody. So I think that's a really good point to make. Yeah.
Totally agree. We are not a one and done outfit. We are in for the long play for sure.
Yeah.
So the next step in our, repair process, kind of the way we define it is, the customer ultimately says yes. It's the client approval process. And on the surface, it might seem like a really, really simple piece of the pie here, but there's actually some ins and outs to kind of how we think about this. So at this point in the adventure, you have received a copy of the scope of work that we see needs to happen in the field, with some details around what we're going to do, how many of that thing we're going to do, and all the information that goes along with that. This is a good moment as the investor to look at kind of the full scope of work and make decisions and final decisions on repairs. Are there things that you want to peel back? Are there questions that you need to ask in terms of impacts to the timeline that might take this longer than you'd like to have to carry the property for? And this is where you kind of really lock into commitments around what you're going to do for the property. Because once you say yes here, then on the back end, the acquisition of materials starts to happen, and the orders get placed, and things start showing up. And from this point forward, it's hard to make changes. Any changes after this become very disruptive to the overall repair process. So some things I would encourage folks to consider are, who all needs to be involved in this in the approval process. Are there additional stakeholders? Is there a listing agent that helps you make marketing decisions? Is there somebody in the team who monitors budgets, or just different folks need to know about? Is there a tenant involved that needs to be brought in on the selections? Things like that. The more we can nail down before we get the process formally in motion with acquisitions, like that helps a lot. The other thing I would consider here is, if you have a budget and budget is X, then I would leave room in your budget for surprises, because there's almost always surprises. So if budget is X, then X minus 10 or 15% for something that unfortunately shows up after we open up walls, it would be a real prudent step to take. This varies tremendously between the complexity of repairs. If repairs are simply paint and carpet and a couple of appliances, your variability on surprise is very low. If we're going to move walls or upgrade plumbing or changing panels and things that get into kind of the guts and the mechanicals of the home, your potential for surprise is a lot higher. So I would have a higher index for those if you're going to make some more complicated repairs. The other basic things to consider around approvals are, how do you communicate them? Is this a written wet signature process, or is this simple email authorizations? Some of these things will require additional documentation. So as the holder of the asset, you may be asked to sign permits or notices of commencement and things like that give us permission to go to work on the home. And then also really important at this point to communicate any kind of deadlines. So is there a don't cross this line date that needs to be communicated, so that we're all aligned around prioritization and the urgency of the project? And then lastly, this would be the right time to nail down how payment's going to be facilitated with your contractor. And there's a myriad of options to explore in that space. Did I touch all the points, Danny? Is that good?
Yeah, no, I think so on that for sure. I think, communication's key, right? And like you said, making sure that getting that scope solid before work starts is a huge deal, like you said, because it formalizes everything and makes sure that we're all on the same page about what finishes and stuff are going to go in. And like I said before, no hard feelings on our side. I'd rather spend way more time getting a solid scope and that we're aligned on materials. And then when it's go time, it's go. So let's go.
Measure twice, cut once. Right.
Right.
Yeah, I'm up like a 2.5 average on measure rate, but
There you go.
working it down. The fourth piece of our adventure here is kind of where we start to think about work in progress. So all of this to get to the point where the job actually starts. And from the way we talk about this, once you say yes, we begin to mobilize our providers for actual construction. Like I said, materials begin to get acquired, and we head down the path of repairs. Just one more kind of plug here. I guarantee you, surprises are going to happen. These will be commonly notated as change orders. And it's important to have those documented thoroughly so that you know what you're saying yes to. And it's okay to ask questions and look for some validation around change orders as they show up, because they have a notorious um, reputation in the industry to be a thing that gets abused. So it's okay to ask questions. They are frustrating, but they are a necessary part of repairs. We'll provide updates to the project in accordance with your requirements. So a lot of investors will say, I want a Tuesday and a Friday check in on the job, and things like that are definitely fine, worth asking for, and okay to be stringent on those. As we go through the life of the project, at least in our case, we've got Home Depot employees that will visit the job site throughout the duration, just to check in on how is quality coming together, how is are the compliance requirements coming together, make sure that the crews are there and moving and keeping things going. And then upon completion, we'll notify you in advance of the wrap of the job in case you want to come see for yourself before we tell you that we're done. You can come out and see how done we are, and then we can punch out things from your feedback before we get to the final phase of the project. Things that I would think about in terms of work in progress. Who are all of the constituents that need to be involved in the repair process? So do you have clients you need to inform and keep up to speed on? That's something we can help you out with. Again, are there tenants or are there other decision makers? And then, how do you want your updates communicated? Is that simple emails? Do we have a weekly check-in or a call, or is it a portal that you use to keep track and manage your projects? We interface with all those different things with the myriad of clients that we interact with today. And then again, just another reminder that, throughout this process, there may be some things that require your involvement. Again, things like permits or authorizations for cities, notices of commencement. If there are changes to the scope of work, the faster we get a decision on those things, the less likely the job gets disrupted and stopped. That's very helpful. And then also just important to be aware of the various kind of compliance constraints that are out there in the space. If you're doing this right, you have to think about things like lead safe work practices on homes that are older than 1978. There's an obligation to be using licensed tradespeople. Are the folks you're working with insured and going to be covered in case they get hurt on your job site? If they're not insured, then you're the insurance plan. Are they pulling permits? Are there HOA requirements? And if they encounter things like mold or asbestos, are they informing you and helping you make decisions around dealing with that stuff the right way? And these are all things that could have downstream ramifications on the ability to sell the home or the overall safety or comfort of the home. Important to consider those throughout the life of this project.
So during the work in progress part, I will also say one of the things that might be a little bit unique for the Home Depot is we set you up with a single point of contact, and a lot of our customers work in multiple markets, so you could interact in the field with different field personnel. We've got a centralized team in Atlanta that really works closely with our field staff, and that's that communication back and forth, updates. And so we've got clients that are more regional based, and we've got some that are more national based. And so no matter the size, I think we've got a nice streamlined communication process that works across the board.
And Danny, real quick before we move on to the fifth point, if somebody wants to learn more about how to kind of utilize the knowledge and the partnership ability at Home Depot, is the best way to walk into a local Home Depot, go online? What is it?
I'm glad you asked that. So we probably should have covered that at the beginning. So if you go into our stores and say, hey, I want to talk to somebody about renovation services, they'll probably have no clue what you're talking about. This program is really a more business to business type relationship, and we're having this discussion because we are looking at partnering with Lima One as kind of that business to business relationship. And so we'll probably come out with some more formalized avenues. But for now, my contact information, I'm sure we can share that after this call, and they can reach out to me. We'll have a an email box that we'll set up for Lima One customers so that they can have a streamlined service. But yeah, we can definitely chat about that after. But the stores will not know for sure.
Good to note. Good to note. And yeah, definitely. You mentioned the partnership that, more to come on that piece, but we'll absolutely get the contact piece squared away.
Yep.
All right, cool. So Eric, we're on point number 5, right?
Last step, and then all this exciting stuff will be behind us. So, and again, on the surface, this is a really simple step, right? It's pay the bill. This is the invoice and payment thing, but when we think about it from how we do business, we go through a couple of steps in order to make sure we're ready to go. First, again, the field team that we use will have validated that the job is actually done. And then when we invoice a project, we put together an invoice package and deliver it to the client. And this varies a little bit by customer, but I think it's okay to insist on things like an itemized list of completed work and or your final checklist that you require for your properties. And if you're maybe, especially if you're remote, photos of the completed items, and then a final invoice statement that says, look, when I pay this bill, all of my obligations are satisfied and I'm free and clear on the repair piece for this project. When we put that together, you review the project and then you facilitate final payment. Other things just simple things to consider when it comes to final invoice packages. Again, who do they go to? We should know that well in advance. Or what does remediation look like if we disagree on items? If there's questions around QC or things like that, how do we get those resolved timely so that we can get the job closed up? And then how do you want to receive this information? Again, is there a format that you like that fits into the software that you already use, or other pieces of information that you need to have captured as part of it so that it's all fitting into your portfolio? And then what are the the terms and details around payment so that your contractor knows how long they should expect to wait and when it's time to follow up in case it exceeds those boundaries. That's the full package. So the way we think about it: ask for a bid, go get a bid put together on the job site, say yes to the job, live through the exciting construction process, and then get to the point where it's time and appropriate to pay the bill.
Yeah. So a couple of quick points. Great overview of how you can really partner with the Home Depot. But I'm going to be 100% honest, no lie and no flattery. That's probably the best bird's eye view of a rehab project from start to finish I've ever heard. So props to you fellas. You definitely know what you're talking about. I think you laid it out, especially for folks who are looking to dip their toe in the water. The American housing industry is absolutely booming. That really was a tip top. As a nerd in the space, I loved it. Spectacular. So thanks so much for the overview. If I could hit you with a couple of follow-up questions. So one thing that's been on our radar, really parallel to COVID, has been lumber prices, right? Everybody's portfolio is doing well year to date, but if I had a forest of pine, I think I'd be doing much better. Unfortunately, I don't. But people who do are doing exceptionally well. I saw a number the other day that was like lumber prices are up 136% this year.
Yeah.
Right. And during certain weeks, you had double-digit increases just within a week. Absolutely incredible. So can you enlighten me a little bit on what's driving this and when are they going to come back down?
Yeah. So this is definitely not the first time we've heard it. It's internally it's talked about all the time. I will say, one, it's all driven. So as you talked about your space being very commoditized, same with lumber, right? It's a supply and demand type thing. And, with a lot of the COVID restrictions, a lot of the lumber yards and stuff were the plants and stuff were shut down. And so lumber stopped. New home builds didn't really slow down too much during the time. The demand has stayed steady, so that's kept demand high. But the manufacturing plants and stuff were shut down for, I don't know, it was probably 2 or 3 months at least, and so that really killed the just supply of lumber. And I think with lumber is one of those things that, you probably don't want too much of it sitting. So it's not like we had, a year's worth of supply sitting, because lumber, it's got a life if it just sits out in the weather. So I think you got a lot of that, and really the pricing is just to help control some of the supply and demand, like I said. And it's I don't know when it's going to come down, because demand hasn't really slowed down. And so I wish I had a magic wand to say, yeah, it's going to come down. But yeah, I don't know. I did hear that new housing building was coming down slightly. At least it slowed down. So maybe that will have an effect down the road. But Eric, I don't know if you've heard anything else, but it's continued to be strong. And I will say our inventory I think is recuperating a little bit. So I know for a while, like, you couldn't even find it. Even at those crazy prices, you couldn't find it. I think our stores are showing more in stock week over week as we've gotten into it.
Yeah. The shocks were just like you said, they were threefold, and it wasn't even just in the new construction space for demand. As people are hanging out around their house a lot more, they're discovering projects, and it has been an insane time to be in our stores. They're running at a clip that I don't ever remember in my 20 years with the company. So it's been amazing. And production being behind because of the lockdowns, and then dual shocks of new house construction going crazy over the summer, and then people being around and consuming on the DIY side. Additionally, like, it's been a weird season, and I can only echo Danny's lack of crystal ball. Like, I don't see where we get to a normal status, because the demand hasn't settled down, especially on the DIY side yet.
And I'll also say, just with the way COVID's going right now, Eric and I are hearing more and more shutdowns in certain areas of the country. So that could then, if those types of plants get shut down again, I mean, then we're going to be back at it again. So it's hard to know with all those factors.
It's not through the woods yet. You mentioned, Eric, measure twice, cut once, and not through the woods yet. I'm able to deploy all of the construction related jokes. One thing you touched on, Eric, was the at home kind of, I don't know what category you put it into, but just sitting at home and starting to do projects.
Mm-hmm.
I was absolutely surprised. And the Home Depot is probably the first place I went to after we were on real solid lockdown around here, outside of Publix. And I was shocked when I rolled up to Home Depot, and it was probably like a Tuesday at 11 o'clock in the morning, and it is packed. You would think it was Black Friday.
Yeah.
So it's crazy how if you just sit at home for really a couple of weeks, you start to, I have time, we can finish up work and then go do this out back, or
you're in your new home office, and you start to hear that faucet that you would never notice before, but you're there for 8 or 12 hours and you hear that drip in the background. Like, that's time to take care of that, because I'm going to go insane. Tons of stories about how just those little things became priorities because A, you had the time, and B, you're spending a lot more time near it and gotta go solve it.
Yeah, so thank you all for being open and dependable, so I wouldn't completely lose my mind whenever I was stuck at home. Another thing I want to touch on, so we mentioned earlier in the conversation, right? Home Depot is headquartered in Atlanta, right?
Mm-hmm.
Y'all are based in Atlanta. I'm in Greenville, South Carolina, 2.5 hours from Atlanta, but our company was founded in Atlanta. So we have a great foothold in the Atlanta market, do consistent volume there every single month. Interested to hear your perspective on the Atlanta market. What's hot? Is it shying towards new construction, rehab, rental? How's pricing? Just what kind of market insights about Atlanta can you give me?
Sure. Happy to. And I will speak a little bit from a limited perspective because, we don't have our own independent portfolio of homes. We just act on other people's portfolios. And if you think back 5-ish years ago, the core metro was very much a hotspot for us. We spent a ton of time in and around the various neighborhoods in the greater Atlanta area, and largely due to kind of the end of the housing foreclosure crisis that started off in like '08, '09 that finally hit in the Southeast. Of late, in the last 6 to 8 months, we spent a lot more time in the exurbs, well outside of the area of Atlanta, with attractive acquisitions happening. Things like Rome, Georgia, or on the northern end of like Canton, Georgia markets. Things that are like 35, 45 miles outside of the metro, being attractive spots for acquisitions because the metro pricing got to be very aggressive and very, very competitive from not people just trying to flip homes, but also just people buying them to consume them. The other advice that we got in a couple of different conversations was there's a little bit of a grain of salt on everything you think about what matters geographically post-COVID, because we're seeing tons of conversations around migrating out to less dense areas and having that be very attractive for people in the long term. And it'll be important to watch how sticky this work from home concept is, because if people can work from anywhere, would they continue to choose to work in Atlanta or any of the other major metros for that matter? But right now, specifically to your question, we spend more of our time in the exurbs than we do in the core of the metro.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Yeah, a concept that keeps coming up is the flight to the suburbs, right? It's headlined everywhere. I'm writing an article for an industry publication and really diving into a lot of the data around it. And my take on it is, certainly there's a non-zero number of folks who are packing up from major cities. Like you said, you can work remote, so you can work anywhere, have more room, get a yard, fence, that type of lifestyle. I think it may be a little overplayed from a long-term perspective. Like, some images are drawn of, downtown Manhattan is going to be a ghost town and nobody's going to want to live there. So a little overdrawn in some places, but definitely like there's a shift, and remote work is going to be with us to a much greater extent than it ever has been before. And that's going to continue to support, hey, do I want, a 600 square foot apartment in Manhattan, or do I want to, live 45 minutes, an hour outside of the city and have, 2 or 3 times, 4 times the space and a yard for the dog and kid. So it's going to be something interesting to watch. And like we talked about here, we're still, you have kind of another, I wouldn't even call it a second wave, but you just have a lot of places going through, second, third waves. A lot of places haven't pushed through the first, and it's just so market by market.
Yeah. We're still learning a lot. And I think, the way we're thinking about this is how much of the change is weather and how much of it is climate, right? Like weather comes and goes, and it doesn't really predict a climate until you've gotten a little further down the path. So there's a lot to figure out yet. There's a lot of us dealing with this stuff for the first time, and probably not the last time, but I think folks like yourself putting together the information and starting to build out perspectives, I think it's going to be real helpful in informing how we tackle this industry going forward.
For sure. What do we miss? What else do people need to know about the Home Depot?
Oh man, that's such a big question. I'm going to say that I want to defer to Danny real quick because
that's fine.
He's been living this.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I think for us, we really pride ourselves on relationships. At the end of the day, it comes down to relationships and that transparency. I think you got to be transparent, open. Everyone's got to be in the job and have the same passion to make it work. And like I said before, if it's failing on one side, it's got to be humming on all sides, and everyone's got to be doing their part. And we've been living this construction stuff since 2008, 2009. I've been in this group for 10 years. Eric's been in there just about that long. And we love this stuff. I mean, it's what we do. That's why when you say, hey, you guys want to come talk about construction and real estate, hell yeah, let's do it. We're here. But yeah, I think relationships are important across the board, and we appreciate the opportunity.
For sure. I really appreciate y'all jumping on. I myself am absolutely a loyal customer of the Home Depot, will continue to be. So thanks for everything y'all do and always looking at how to improve. Really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us today.
I appreciate you having us. It's been a great
Yeah,
conversation.
thank you very much.